2024 was a bummer, and we're going to nail down just exactly why it was such a bummer. It all starts with the lineup.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Reds. We are your daily source for all things Cincinnati Reds. I'm Stephen Offenbaker. He's Jeff Carr. And we have a combined 12 years of experience covering the Cincinnati Reds. We love baseball. We love the Reds. And we have taken our love of the game and our love for this team, and we've turned it into information for you. Locked On Reds is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And on today's podcast, listen, if you were mad at us yesterday for bringing you the sunshine and the kittens and the rainbows and all the other things that we brought you, then today's show is for you, because we're going to be talking about the other side of that coin. We're going to be talking about the things that went wrong, where this team disappointed in 2024. We're going to talk about exactly what went wrong for the Reds and what resulted in them missing the playoffs and ultimately costing manager David Bell his job. And it's going to be a lot of the same words that you heard when David Bell was let go. We're going to be talking about accountability. We're going to be talking about consistency. We're going to be talking about discipline. And we're going to be talking about players that really had that sophomore slump or had that letdown and didn't quite get to where we expected them to be in 2024 based on what we saw from them in 2023. So we're going to get into all of that coming up here in just a minute. But before we do, let's shout out the sponsor of today's podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you're going to get started with $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed. It's odds that Jeff Carr can't even mess up. Just visit FanDuel.com today to get started. You can take the over, Jeff. You can take the over. But where we're going to get started today is with the lineup. The lineup is really where this season failed to launch. It's really where the Reds never found the consistency that they needed to reel off those 8, 9, 10 game winning streaks that they needed when they needed them. One guy would be hot, the rest of the lineup would go cold. A couple other dudes would heat up, and then the guy that was hot would cool off. And they never really were able to put it all together at one time. And that's really, where they failed to get started. There was never really just a purring lineup. The engine was never really warmed up in all of the 2024 baseball season.
Yeah, and for me, this is the reason that we list this the number one reason why everything went wrong for the Reds in 2024. I know that there will be a lot of folks that were like, but they were so injured and injuries was such a big problem, but we're not going to sit here and tell you that injuries were the whole thing. The guys who stepped up behind those guys that got hurt just weren't getting the job done. We said yesterday on the show where we said, the things that were good about the season, if it was Elly and Tyler Stephenson, the lineup did all right. But outside of those two guys, and really, I do kind of include Jonathan India in this, the lineup just wasn't that big of a deal. I said before the season that this team, it was a bit of a bold prediction, but I said that they could flirt with the most runs scored in the modern era. Like, you have to say that because before 1900 the Reds had some crazy run numbers, but in 1999 they scored 865 runs. In 2023 they scored 783 runs. So we're not talking about like, oh, this was some far-fetched take that I just pulled out of nowhere. Like, they had the guys that they could possibly do this, but nothing went their way. Guys like Jeimer Candelario, while the power numbers were all right, everything else wasn't that great. Spencer Steer never really got that consistency going. That was one of the big things with him, is that we said he's a very consistent hitter. You can trust what you're going to get from him on a daily basis. He hit that sophomore slump real hard. TJ Friedl, while injuries sapped his season, and while he was constantly dealing with one thing or another, when he was in the game, the only thing that he was really doing was taking that inside pitch and pulling it out to right field. If he didn't get that pitch, he was kind of mitigated a little bit, and they kind of were able to either pitch around him or completely nullify his existence in the lineup in the few games that he got to play. So there was so much about this lineup that just became such a huge sore spot for this team, especially for the fact that they pitched so well and they limited their opponents so well.
Yeah, I love that you started this with Jonathan India, because when we talked about the 1-2 punch, the positives of this lineup yesterday, we talked about Elly de la Cruz being the team leader in OPS plus, 19% above league average at 119 in 160 games played. Then number 2 on this team was Tyler Stephenson at 112 OPS plus. Jonathan India is your only other hitter for the 2024 baseball season with a positive OPS plus. He was 5% better than league average at 105. You get to Spencer Steer, 4% below league average, 96 OPS plus, and that tells you everything you need to know about what went wrong with Spencer Steer's season. He was just below league average. He just could never quite get it going, but this was the guy that we were really counting on to be a big part of driving this engine that would be the Reds lineup. And especially after Matt McLain went down, when that injury happened, you and I were both, looking, hey, Spencer, we're looking directly at you. You're going to be the guy that does this. And he just couldn't get it going. And I don't know if that was a product of a little too much pressure on him, or if it was just a true sophomore slump going into his first, full-time, counting on him to be a 3, 4, 5 hitter in this lineup kind of a season for a player that's really still pretty young. This was only his age 26 season.
Yeah, and I think, too, that there's a reason that we focus on Spencer Steer first, because it is easy to look at Candelario and look at Will Benson and look at some other guys that just really fell off. I mean, CES, he was bad before he got hurt, and then he got hurt and we never saw him again. Noelvi Marte, after the suspension, was not very good at all. But I feel like I expected more from Spencer Steer than I expected from those guys. So that's why we start with them. There's definitely no doubt about the fact that, losing a Matt McLain before the season even begins, everybody has to kind of take a step forward. And nobody did. I mean, we saw Elly do that and we saw Tyler Stephenson do that, but even Tyler Stephenson, it kind of took until June before things really got going. Those first 2 months, it was Elly, and we're just hoping somebody else has a good game, because nobody else was having a consistently good stretch of games, week, month, what have you. Like, there was a lot of struggles in this. And I do for just a moment, because I understand, as big a fan as I am about Will Benson, just how much his struggles really hurt this team.
Man, it was ugly, Jeff. Ugly. We're talking 24% below league average. We're talking a slash line of 187, 274, 376. While he did somehow miraculously manage to muscle 14 home runs in the season, everything was awful all the time. And honestly, his performance in 2024 says to me he should be nowhere near the big league roster in 2025 if this team is serious about winning. I think Will Benson played himself into a one-way trip to Louisville in 2025.
Well, and it's a bummer too, because in February we heard, man, he spent the offseason really working hard to hit left-handed pitching. He wants to be an everyday ball player, so that got us excited. But then he didn't even hit right-handed pitching in 2024. And as easy as he is to root for, and the kind of guy that you really want to succeed, whether you're a Reds fan or anyone else. I remember getting texts from our host over at Lockdown Guardians who were bummed out halfway through the year to see how bad he was struggling. And they're just like, man, we really wanted that guy to really go off and really succeed, because he's just such a likable guy. But at the end of the day, it's what you do on the field, and what he did on the field. It just screamed that the Reds need to go out and get an outfielder this offseason. It screamed the need that this team has if it wants to get where we all expect them to be. Not where we hope they can be, but where we expect them to be in 2025, because I don't think Will Benson can get them there.
No, the outfield as a whole is an absolute train wreck. And I think that's why during this offseason, it's going to have to be Nick Kral's number one target. He talked about the fact recently that they're going to have to get better in the outfield. The outfield play is going to have to get more consistent. It's going to have to get better. And the only way that's going to happen is if they go get some actual Major League Baseball outfielders. Even Jake Fraley, you look at his season, Jeff, a 95 OPS plus, 5% below league average, and you think, well, okay, great. The problem is his power, for the most part, went away till the very end of the season. He finished with 5 home runs, and most of his home runs came at the end. You look at his slash line, and he was 277, 330, 386. Now, I'll take the 277 and the 330, but that slugging percentage, that's going to have to improve in 2025. And I think it's a big part of why this lineup couldn't get going. There was really no big basher that could come up in a moment and deliver a 3-run blow. And look, before the comments, guys, I love you in the comment section, but before you get fired up, I understand everything that Jake Fraley went through in 2024. I understand all of the things he was dealing with between the illness and the stuff with his family. And I get it. And it's not to say that I'm talking bad about Jake Fraley, the person. I'm just saying that the Reds needed him to be that bopper that he was in 2023. And that guy wasn't available. This contact hitting Jake Fraley that could maybe get on base, and then there was nobody to drive him in, really didn't help the team very much. We need his power groove to come back. I'm looking at Jake Fraley to be a valuable 4th or 5th outfielder on this team in 2025. And what's going to make him valuable is having him as a guy that you can put in this lineup and could maybe hit you a home run while he's in the lineup. And that's what makes Jake valuable.
I think he was a microcosm for, Nick Krall said the other day, he said, this lineup really needs to focus on contact and less strikeouts and not necessarily power. And that's why I just thought that was wrong, because Jake Fraley did that and it really wasn't much of a help. And sure, he might have been one of the only guys that was having a really nice year as far as the one statistic of batting average goes. But consider for a moment that the Reds ranked 19th in home runs. And they play at one of the easiest ballparks to hit home runs in. And they rank 19th. You've got to hit home runs at Great American Ballpark. And the fact that they were just unable to do that was such a detriment. And I hope that they improve in that area next season, because we've seen power change the game. You know what else we've seen change the game here in these playoffs, kind of referring to the performances of the playoffs, is when you got a really good closer, you can do a lot of different things. We thought the Reds had that whenever the season started. It turned out to be something very different. Get in the game with Game Time. They're going to give you the best deals at the last minute. Something Steve and I always use, especially during baseball season, but hey, it's great during football season. It's great during basketball season, hockey games as well. You can literally go to every Cincinnati sporting event and some of the other entertainment things like theater and comedy acts and different concerts and all that stuff. Game Time has it all. And the closer that you get to your event beginning, the more the price goes down. They've got a lot of great deals when it comes to Bengals games, Bearcats games, and Cyclones games. Got to check out that Game Time app. Plus, if you're on the road and you want to visit a new stadium, they've got views from your seat, so you know exactly what you're going to be seeing. Download the Game Time app today and create an account and use that code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. So for your first purchase, you're going to get great deals on last minute tickets and an extra $20 by just using the promo code LOCKEDONMLB. Terms apply, but make sure you create your account today and use that code LOCKEDONMLB. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. We're talking Cincinnati Reds baseball all day, every week, every month, all year long. Make sure you subscribe to get at least 30 minutes of Reds talk in your feed every single day. And we're going over where it all went wrong for the Cincinnati Reds in 2024. Yesterday, we talked about all the good stuff. So let's, if you're like, man, you guys are really glum. Yesterday, we were really happy. So it's a little bit of trying to split things up here and not sound like we're,
I'd imagine the comment section yesterday is going to be calling us out for being homers and being too happy. And the comment section for today's show is going to be like, what is wrong with you guys? It's the off season and you're being all down and negative.
Yeah.
So just watch both episodes together before you form your opinion.
you got to put these two puzzle pieces together, then you get the whole picture, because 2024 was a disappointment overall. And quite frankly, it was more than just injuries, because we see that a lot. We see a lot of folks saying, well, the Reds were hurt. So, well, there were statistics that said that there were other teams that were more hurt than the Reds. It was just who came in after them did not perform the way that they needed to. One area where the Reds were not touched by injuries and were not affected by injuries the way that other areas of the team was the bullpen. Now, I mean, Ian Jabot was hurt, and there were a couple of guys that spent some time on the IL, but the Reds had their bullpen ace all year long. And Alexis Diaz, Steve, if I'd have told you that Alexis Diaz actually finished the year with an ERA under 4, I mean, I was surprised when I looked at that number. It was not a good year for Diaz.
That was just sheer willpower to rein it in, because man, was he bad quite often through the first half of the season. I mean, there were times, Jeff, I was ready to send him down, and the problem was there was nobody to call up and replace him. I think that's really the only thing that saved him, because there were stretches there where he was just really, really bad, and it is pretty confounding. And still, you're right. As bad as it was, when you get to the end of it all and you look at his line for the entire season, he got into 60 games. He threw 56 and a third innings for the Reds, Jeff, 28 saves and a 3.99 ERA. He struck out 55, and here's the number that will really tell you a lot of what was wrong often with Alexis Diaz. He walked 31 batters in 56 innings. That's just absolutely unacceptable for anybody that you consider to be a back of your bullpen kind of guy. He just simply disappointed more often than not.
Yeah, I mean, the bullpen ace, you don't want him to be Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, where it's like you never really know what you're going to get. It could be really good or it could be really bad. And looking at his season-long numbers, especially that ERA number, I kind of want to point out, this is something we say a lot here on the podcast, is that when you're talking about a relief pitcher, ERA is very deceiving. You've got to look at some other numbers. And while normally we're saying that because a high ERA can be very deceiving, consider this for a moment, Steve. At the end of August, he had a 4.75 ERA. So it was the month of September. He had 9 appearances. All of them were 1 inning apiece, and he didn't allow any runs. He had a shutout month of September, and quite frankly, up until September 17th, it was actually a perfect month. He allowed no base runners up until that point. So there was a lot about it that, to kind of borrow a football term, he was doing this in garbage time because the Reds were really out of it by this point. So I understand that helps out his season numbers as a whole, but when the Reds needed him, when they needed that shutdown guy, they did not have it. And quite frankly, and you can make fun of me all you want for being a little bit too bullish on our own guys here, but at the beginning of the season, I would have said, not that he's better than him, but that he's in the same conversation as Emmanuel Clase. There is absolutely no case to be made for that now. He's not anywhere close to that guy, because that dude he's the best closer, the best bullpen ace in baseball, and there's a pretty big gap between him and the next guy.
Yeah, boy, did you miss on that one. Let me ask you this. Looking at what we saw, having the benefit now of being able to look back on the entire 2024 season with Alexis Diaz, we're both in agreement. Clearly a disappointment. We're both in agreement. Clearly that Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was at work here. But this is what we've come to expect from relief pitchers, and especially relief pitchers in Cincinnati. You just never know. It's the Forrest Gump bullpen philosophy. You never know what you're going to get around here. Right. That being said, is Alexis Diaz your guy going into 2025? Is he still your back of the bullpen closer for 2025? Or do the Reds need to go get somebody? Or is there somebody in-house you think they could hand that role to?
I think he is the guy, but I want Graham Ashcraft to compete with him.
The one. That's where I was going with this, because I think that Graham Ashcraft's coming for that job. I think that somewhere along the way, maybe before spring training, maybe early in spring training, someone's going to pull Graham aside and put their arm around his shoulder, and they're going to tell him, listen, Graham, you're not going to be in this rotation. We're going to put you in the bullpen. We think you can be really good out there, and we think you can be a back of the bullpen kind of guy. And Graham Ashcraft is going to be pissed off. He's going to take that anger, and he's going to go take this closer job away from Alexis Diaz. That's exactly what is going to happen.
Well, because that's how he needs to pitch, right? Like Graham Ashcraft, I think he has proven that Graham Ashcraft at 80% is not a super scary pitcher. But Graham Ashcraft at 100% could be lights out, could be the kind of guy that you can't touch. So if you tell him, look, we need 3 outs, or maybe even we need 6 outs, go get 6 outs, go pitch one time through the opposing lineup, he can do that pretty well. And I feel like that needs to be the focus for him, because while it is a stone cold fact that starting pitchers are more valuable than relief pitchers, when you consider what a guy is as a starter and what he could be as a relief pitcher, and knowing that if you continue to do the same things that he has done for the last couple of years, you're probably not going to get much different results. Let's try him out in the bullpen, because we've seen him. Look, he has great stretches as a starter, but I think that he could be much better as a relief pitcher, and we maybe don't have that variance, that month or 6-week period where he is absolutely detrimental to this team, like he has seen these stretches over the last couple of years.
So I bring that up to set it up for this, Jeff, because I agree with everything you just said. I think Graham Ashcraft is going to be a closer, but I don't think that means Alexis Diaz becomes his setup man. Really, what this team has lacked has been a guy that you can pitch when your closer is tired. We have seen this problem emerge with the Reds and this is a big part of what went wrong, is that guys were overused. They got run down. They would have stretches of poor performance because they were overused or not used correctly. And in the case of the Reds, they were bad. And then Alexis Diaz wasn't pitching for 14 days at a time, or however many it was that got stretched out to. With a good Reds team, where you need a guy that can close games more often than not, you need more than one guy that you trust back there. And I don't want to see Alexis Diaz as Graham Ashcraft's setup man. I want him to be the other closer. I want him to be the 1B, because I think that's what this bullpen has really lacked. It's been, okay, you've got the lights out guy, but he can't pitch every day. And quite frankly, David Bell ran some guys' arms into the ground. What he did to Fernando Cruz, what he did to Ian Jabot for 2022 and 2023 was almost criminal. I mean, you can't double and then redouble a guy's workload and expect that he doesn't end up missing a whole year like Ian Jabot did. So you need multiple arms down there that you can rely on. And I'm not ready to give up on Alexis Diaz. I'm not ready to say that we can't rely on him at all, but he needs help. And if he gets the help, he can still be a closer. But I no longer have that feeling when Alexis Diaz comes into a baseball game, like, all right, he's going to get this. We got it. It's more, well, what's going to happen now? Because here he comes.
You could almost set your watch to it that he was going to allow at least one hit and at least one walk. And you just kind of hoped that those didn't string together to be runs. Because while he did struggle at a lot of different things, one thing that he was very good at was that he didn't allow a lot of home runs. In fact, he was very good at limiting the home runs. It was just base runners galore, and that's not good either. So yeah, I'm with you. It's not time to punt, but quite frankly, we're like at third down here with Alexis Diaz. We got to figure something else out. We got to make sure that
You've been watching a lot of football.
I got football on my brain, man. I got football on my brain. But no, I think, yeah.
All right, Jeff. Listen, we hit on this a little bit in yesterday's episode when we were talking about the good. And we talked about it a little bit up top here with things that you're going to hear. And part of the problem for the Reds in 2024, part of the things that went wrong were inconsistencies in defense, poor fielding, and bad base running decisions and miscues. And coming up, we're going to talk about a little bit of both of those things. We've got that for you right after this. Are you an NFL fan? Well, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page as you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place just one $5 bet on FanDuel. That's right, $200 back in bonus bets with just one $5 bet over on FanDuel. Even though baseball is done for the most part for the season, although you can still get in on the League Championship Series and the World Series, but for the most part, with baseball being done, the Elly parlay is out. You can check out stats on Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, so many great Cincinnati Bengals you can build a parlay from to get your win. And again, a $5 bet's going to get you $200 in bonus bets back. Those are odds even Jeff Carr can't mess up. If you want to get started, just visit fanduel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Thanks for watching Locked On Reds here on YouTube. Make sure you've clicked the subscribe and the notification bell and like this episode. Click all the buttons. Just click them all. But we know there's times that you can't watch us on YouTube. So guess what? You can take us with you. Take us to the gym. Take us on your commute in the car. Take us for the walk in the park. We're available wherever you get your podcast. We're on every podcasting app out there. So we can go with you because we want to talk Reds baseball with you. All right, Jeff. Fielding. Poor fielding inconsistencies, base running miscues, poorly timed, being caught stealing. These are things that factored largely in the termination of David Bell. This was a big part of why that dude lost his job. And it's something that Terry Francona has pointed to right out of the gate that he wants to rectify. He talked about the game needs to be played the right way, that the baseball needs to be played correctly. And these were the things he's talking about. People need to be able to field their positions and field routine ground balls and not make errors. Players need to understand what is going on around them in a game and not get picked off and not get thrown out. And if you're going to steal a base, it needs to be a smart steal. It needs to be timely. And you need to not try and steal in situations where you're going to run your team out of an inning. And all of that fact comes back around to the talk of discipline and consistency and accountability, right? All of those words, all the buzzwords that we've been talking about since basically the Reds fired David Bell with 5 games to go in the year. So when we're talking about what went wrong with this team, that's a big part of what went wrong. There were guys that would make terrible errors. And as good as we talked about Elly being, and Elly being the 1-2 punch in this lineup, right. He's guilty of a lot of these things. He's guilty of the olays in the infield and letting ground balls get by him or throwing the ball away on routine plays that he should be making as a major league shortstop. He's guilty of maybe not choosing his spots as well as he could when he's stealing a base. You know, I talked about he had 67 steals, and that number is not really going to go down much. But I think Terry Francona is going to get Elly to recognize when is the most appropriate time to get those steals. And those are the things that were a big part of the problem, because there were guys, I think, that got caught up in the keeping up with Elly effect. Guys that were trying to run when they shouldn't be trying to run. Guys that were trying to play in a way that was maybe more flashy or more, noticeable than what they should be doing. And I think that was all part of keeping up with Elly. I really do. And I think those are the things that doomed this team, and those are the things that have to be corrected for 2025.
I find it interesting, and it was something that I thought whenever Terry Francona had his introductory press conference, and he kept saying, play the game the right way and all this other stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, of course we want them to play the right way. But it dawned on me, Steve, I don't remember David Bell saying that a whole lot. In fact, I remember David Bell saying, we got to let them play their game, not play the game the right way. I almost feel not even necessarily that guys were worried about keeping up with Elly, but that Elly's brand of baseball became this team's brand of baseball. And Elly has more raw talent than just about anybody else on the field. Elly can most of the time just athlete his way out of a jam because he is that good of an athlete. Not everybody's that good of an athlete, but they just relied on their raw abilities and not really any sort of strategy or focus or anything like that. And because of that, details that quite frankly aren't even in the fine print, details that should be obvious, like, just making sure that you're down on a ground ball, fielding it with two hands, ready to make the throw, making sure that you don't get picked off of second base as the ghost runner in extra innings, making sure that you hit the cutoff man when you're throwing from the outfield. Basic things that seem kind of obvious. This team missed most of the time because Elly can get away with that. Not everybody else can. In fact, most people won't. So I feel like Terry Francona coming in and changing even just that one simple message to a thing that sounds so very basic to most baseball fans is going to make such a huge difference. Because, Steve, what is the one thing, and as much as Cleveland, as the Guardians, are a very well-run organization that we would love the Reds to be like, what is the one thing that they consistently do every single year? They don't miss on the details on the field. They hit everything. They make sure that everything is covered, and they play the game the right way on defense, on the bases, and at the plate. And the Reds just didn't do that enough in 2024, and that is why we are sitting here talking about what went wrong.
Yeah, Terry Francona said something on I can't remember which interview it was. I watched a bunch of his. I saw him, do Dan Patrick. I saw him do a couple other things.
He's a great interview.
One of the things he said was that being a smaller market team, you have to get more out of what you have. And that's really a great summation of what the Reds didn't do in 2024. They not only did they not get more out of what they had, they took a step back from what they got out of them in 2023. Yeah. They got less. So the results are as you would expect, a fired manager and a missed playoff team. So I think that Francona is going to reel some of this in, but it's probably an oversimplification. I mean, there's a lot more that went wrong and contributed to this team not making playoffs and them being as bad as they were. But you can look at these two things. You can look at the errors, the unforced errors, stuff that drove me crazy, like Stuart Fairchild seemingly forgetting that he was playing defense from time to time, because we saw
how many outs there were in Milwaukee.
Yeah,
that one play.
And again, at Great American Ballpark at the beginning of the year, he forgot how many outs there were. So he did that multiple times. And, but then we would see the flashes of really good defense too, knowing what he was capable of. And I think that's what Francona will bring is make that consistent to where everybody's playing at their peak level all the time. And if they don't, he will hold them accountable. And if they don't, and they can't get it together, he'll make changes. And that's what this team has lacked. And if we had a fourth segment, which we're not going to, but if we had a fourth segment, the fourth segment could basically be all of the things that David Bell let slide. That's what you could title it. You could talk about all the things that Bell let slide that ultimately built upon and dominoed and snowballed to get you the team that you got in 2024. And those are the things that Francona will correct. And ultimately it's going to lead to players, I think, having rebound performances in 2025.
Yeah, I think that the easiest summation of what we're talking about, the easiest example, and I alluded to it there, but I'll just go ahead and say it. The easiest thing that points to what we're talking about that I think that we will not see, hopefully we won't see it all, we should see very, very rarely, if ever, in 2025, is the fact that Noelvi Marte, in the 10th inning of game 162, as the ghost runner on second base, was picked off to start the top of the 10th. Or the bottom of the 10th. Nope, top of the 10th. Had it right the first time.
You were right the first time.
The point is, that's the kind of thing we're talking about. That if that happens in game one, it never happens again. But it happened in game 162. And that is just unacceptable. And that is why the Reds made the change that they did. And that is why we're so bullish on this team getting to the promised land, getting to the playoffs, because they got the right guy leading them. Now they got to go make some moves. We'll talk a little bit more about that as the week goes along. What are those moves going to look like? Who's available? What kind of capital do the Reds have to play with a little bit if we're talking about trades and stuff like that? There's also so much to get into. We're really going to dive into some performances this season. Guys who impressed us, guys who didn't. We're going to give you a little bit more nitty-gritty details, and quite frankly, this episode is going to hurt. I might have something other than water in my cup, but when we're diving into guys like Will Benson and CES and Noelvi Marte, because there's a lot to get to with this team and to put a bow on 2024. We're just beginning that process, and here in the next couple of weeks, we will kind of get all of that and put it all together for you so that you can be like, bam, that's 2024. We're going to put that away. We're going to head to 2025 because this is going to be a really exciting offseason. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Make sure now you check out Locked On MLB. Sully's got you covered all throughout the playoffs with his knowledge of the game and a little bit of witty sense of humor as well. Got a link in the description of today's episode so that you don't have to go looking for it. Make sure you click on that because Locked On MLB is just like Locked On Reds, free and available on all platforms, and we are both part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Steve, take us away.
We're going to continue to monitor the offseason news. We're going to listen for the rumors. We're going to bring you all of the information. We'll continue to break down this team, do the post-mortem work of breaking down what went wrong and preparing for what is going to go right. And we're going to keep you locked on Reds every single day.